And apparently we are live. Ow! Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are live and alive.
Live and alive. I love some weeks. Some weeks people aren't live. Some weeks when it says live, it's a very complicated thing. The live thing.
Okay.
Right. Because most events these days say they're live when they're online, and they're not necessarily live, are they?
No.
They may be pre-recorded. We've done pre-recorded in the past as well. So
we have occasionally when we've needed to, haven't we? We've done a non-live live. A non-live. Is it called a non-live live, or what is there a terminology for it? Or
yeah, there's it's called a pre-recorded live.
There we go. So at some point we were live, just not the moment that we said we were live.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect sense. And it reminds, thinking of music, I know you always like to have a little musical start. Alive and Kicking by Simple Minds was just the song that came to my mind as we were chatting about the word live.
Ah, that's a classic. That's an absolute classic. Now, can you remember the very famous movie that featured another song from that particular album by Simple Minds?
I think I can. Oh no, yeah. Was it the Breakfast Club?
Breakfast Club about me.
Yeah, were they off the same album? Those two songs?
Yes, they really were.
Fabulous. What an album that would have been.
Or that is a classic album.
Mm.
I'm going to say I think it's called Once Upon a Time, but then I may be wrong.
But I doubt it.
I can't always be right about these things. But yeah, what an absolute classic stonking album. Yeah. And then a few years later, God, we're just going to go off onto a tangent here a minute.
That's fine.
And then a few years later, they had that fabulous song, Belfast Child. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah. Jim Kerr, was he the lead singer of?
Jim Kerr is still the lead singer.
Sorry, I'm sort of speaking Wikipedia past tense there.
He's still alive. Simple Minds are still alive. They're still putting out albums. In fact, I think they put out an album last year. Still going. It was Charlie Birchall, the guitarist, and Jim Kerr. They are the two founding members and remaining members of Simple Minds. They've had various other members come and go in the phrase of all of that. Yeah, but still going, still big thing. And do you remember he was, I think, married to?
Yes. Blonde hair, Patsy Kensit? No.
Yeah, I think he was married to Patsy Kensit, but before that, he was married to Chrissie Hynde from the.
Oh yes, the Pretenders.
From the Pretenders.
There you
Don't get me wrong.
No. Very good. Very good.
Don't get me wrong. Oh dear.
Now, before we end the musical chat, because clearly ergonomics is our main theme, but music is obviously our sort of ancillary theme, as it were. What about all this stuff going on with this new arena, Graham, up in Manchester? That every day or so they seem to be cancelling gigs and stuff like that. It's not really the best footing to get off in, is it? With Olivia Rodrigo and Take That, there's Barry Manilow, there's it's just and who was the one? Someone in the hoodie. It just seems to be an absolute car crash of a start for a new venue.
Helen is here as a guest. It's my fault. I should have let Helen in. I'm now going to rectify that, Helen. Sorry.
Well done.
So give me a second, and I will rectify that. God, dear. See, there's me saying I hadn't heard, and it's all my fault. So
apology accepted.
Yeah. There we go. Helen, you'll be able to get in very, very shortly. It's been one of those weeks. It's been I've just been so busy. It's been a little bit mad. We're going to talk about as well. I wanted to talk about. So yeah, you were saying about the Manchester thing. The thing about that is, don't open it until you're ready.
Yeah.
Get your ducks lined up and in order before before you go ready on these things. Just tell me about where you've been this week, because you've been to quite a few Ergo-related events this week.
I have. So let's start with Wednesday. Started off Wednesday with Sovereign Business Solutions over in Halesowen, so not too far from me. Spending some time training their inside sales and external sales people on our products and solutions. And if you saw the LinkedIn post, it was the products were all laid out on a tennis table, which is the first time I've done a presentation off a table tennis table. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
So the space they'd got sort of in with all the salespeople, there wasn't really a big enough. We didn't want to go off into a meeting room and take it separate. So there was a tennis table, and we just said, there we go, lay all the stuff out on the table. So yeah, never done that before.
Lay all your stuff on the table.
So that was really good. I mean, it's really interesting when you go and see people who are talking to customers about ergonomics, and it's just about raising their level of understanding about some of the basics around ergonomics. Clearly some very, very good salespeople, but just enhancing their knowledge, little pointers for things to look out for, little tips and things that they can be talking about when trying to introduce products. So that was really, really interesting. And yesterday morning, I drove up to Edinburgh, and this morning I've driven back from Edinburgh. So I've literally arrived back home about 30 minutes ago. So again, product training with one of our IT reseller partners up in Edinburgh.
I just want to add at this point, as with all people that are involved with ergonomics, do what we say, don't do what we do.
Yes.
You see, because that's oh yes, well done, Richard. You got another Simple Minds pun in there. Before you open a new arena, I think they promised us a miracle. Promised you a miracle on the waterfront as well, wasn't it? There we go.
Are we still on Simple Minds? Sorry.
We literally are. Yeah, that's
okay.
another Simple Minds song. Yeah, promised you a miracle, which is always good. But our guest is here.
Yes,
I've got to apologise deeply to now for not sending her the link. Helen, thanks for joining.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, Helen.
Sorry, I completely misjudged giving you the link there this morning, but there we are. Thanks for
I should have
joining
looked earlier. I was looking just before the session and then emailing you, and of course you were busy by then.
Of course. Well, I'm always busy. It's a madness. Are you a fan of Simple Minds? Just before we get started on talking serious stuff.
Not a big fan, but not opposed. If it's on the radio, I'll leave it on.
Yeah. Did you ever have any Simple Minds albums? Did you go through a Simple Minds period? No, not really. No. Okay.
I was a bit more heavy metal.
Were you? I love that. Great. Heavy, yeah. What was that, Stephen? Were you kind of heavy metal?
No, I was just adjusting the hoodie in the back. I was actually thinking, when we call shows, each show like has a name, like each sort of Friends episode. I think we could just call this one Two Simple Minds, couldn't we? Maybe referring to me and you.
Yeah. No,
I liked the way you left me out of that one. That was very diplomatic.
Never insult a guest. Never insult a guest.
Two Simple Minds and one large one. Now, heavy metal very quickly before we go into all of the serious stuff. So,
oh dear.
Yeah. Any particular favourite bands in there? I mean, did you go more on the sort of melodic, classic rocky type side of things? Are you
went through phases, quite varied tastes, and went through phases. Everything.
Iron Maiden fan at any point?
Okay, not a big fan.
Yeah. Like some are more like Slayer and Anthrax and that sort of thing.
Well, probably a bit more Alice in Chains and Metallica. Yeah. Rage Against the Machine when I was in a particularly bad mood.
Well, now you see, that's a really good segue, isn't it? Rage Against the Machine. Because today, Helen's here to talk a little bit about what she does and things like vocational rehabilitation. And actually, the machine sometimes gets it really wrong for people, doesn't it?
That is a really good segue, and you're quite right. I like that. Yeah.
There we go. I think we could almost like put you in a cape, bring you in like you're going to do battle in the wrestling ring, with Rage Against the Machines, song playing, and then you start off. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Okay, so vocational rehabilitation. So for a lot of people, they say, what does that actually mean? I always laugh that I've done it for years and my mum still can't quite work it out. So it's basically supporting someone with anything they need. So it's not just health interventions. Obviously, a lot can centre around health, but anything that they need in order to access work in the first place when they have additional barriers, stay in work, return to work, or redirect their career. So change direction for whatever reason. Obviously, quite often because people just can't do what they did before. And vocational rehab, you can find in all sorts of settings. So a lot of what I do is very much health related. It's very much around the insurance sector and supporting employers. Employers quite often will refer to us when they need health support, but perhaps something a little bit different to the traditional approach. And what I always say is we take a vocational rehab approach to that. But voc rehab can be happening in prisons. It could be happening in communities, supporting people with learning difficulties or, all sorts of different challenges that are acting as barriers to them accessing the workplace or staying in the workplace.
Now, you say this is why I wanted to get Helen in, Stephen, because I think this is an area that potentially doesn't get spoken about enough in the sort of general field of ergonomics and sort of general workplace assessments, etc., which is ultimately, it's all very well saying, okay, we've got this person at work at a desk, this is their environment, is it working for them? Do we need to make some adjustments and changes here? If what's going on at home it isn't great, or if they're struggling to get to work or anything else, then you can't start there. And I'm going to give you, I may have talked about this once before, but I'm going to give you an example, obviously naming no names, but there was one case that I got involved with years ago where I was brought in. I think I was about the fourth assessor that was brought into this case, and everybody else had looked at it and they'd gone, okay, we'll try this and we'll try that and we'll try the other, and it was one adjustment after another. And what happened, the pattern that was reoccurring was that they would try, the person involved would try this particular adjustment. It seemed to make a little bit of difference, but then it was like, oh, this is just not really having the ongoing desired effect. There wasn't an overall change of behavior, etc. But I tried to dig a little bit deeper while I was there, and one of the things that the manager said to me, which really struck a chord, was that this person seemed to be, they wondered whether they were like, going out every evening or something like that, because they always came in quite disheveled in the mornings, etc. By asking the right questions and getting to the bottom of it, do you know what I found out? This is someone that's got got an office job, sort of 12-hour a day in a fairly big organization, day in, day out, right? They were homeless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could see that was where the story. I don't think you have told this, but I thought that's where the story was going.
And until you start dealing with that, nothing else is going to make a penny's worth of difference, is it?
Yeah.
Maybe
And with
you
people
want to
working from home, sorry, I was just going to say, with people working from home more, that you get referrals through for an ergonomic assessment of their home workstation, but actually you get there and you realise that they're living in a 2-bedroom house with, a few children, maybe a parent living with them as well, and there just isn't the space. And actually, you can have the best desk setup in the world, but someone's going to be a bit tense working in that environment, and it's not ideal. Yeah.
And we said this, Graham, didn't we? We said this for a long time when we discussed things like, particularly people working in London. And it sort of ties it back to the pandemic, but pull it on forward from there, was the fact that people working in London in particular, a lot of the people with the price of properties, are potentially working in their home could be a single room with a bed and a kitchen and maybe a bathroom off there. There's no space to put a desk. So actually trying to offer things like working from home, etc., isn't necessarily going to fit for everyone. And like you say, it's not looking at it's looking at the broader and the fuller picture, not just picking and pulling out one certain part and going, let's get the desk set up right, or whatever it would be. Actually, like you say, Helen, you can have the best desk in the world, the best chair, all the best equipment, the best headset, but if there isn't really an appropriate place for you to work in an appropriate environment, all that expensive kit is worth absolutely nothing if you cannot function and do your job because the environment in which you're being required to work.
Yeah, and that's the same in an office or work site environment as well. That I had a case referred through for an ergonomic assessment, and when we went there, actually that wasn't the issue. She had been given all the equipment she needed in the past and kind of got rid of that and tried something new on her own. When you give them what they need and then they try something new because they prefer the one over there, it was that kind of situation. And I completely understand it. But the reason that was happening is she was, it didn't take long. Like you said, Graham, if you ask the right questions, and didn't take much time with her to realize she was very sensitive to external stimuli. So touch, so kind of if a piece of equipment had the wrong kind of tactile feel, the light, she was very sensitive to light, very sensitive to noises, very sensitive to perfumes. The other thing going on was that actually the employer kept suggesting she should work from home. And when you're in the environment with the other people, you pick up quite quickly, actually, I think the people in the office she's working with are quite keen for her to work from home, but that wasn't right for her.
No.
She wanted to be in the office. She was actually lonely at home. She wanted to be in the office, and there were reasons within the job that it would be better for her to be in the office. So it was a case of kind of, once you knew that, there are things you can do, there are adaptations you can make, so long as there's a little bit of flexibility there and a bit of conversation around how you engage with other people in the office if you want them to wear less perfume, that kind of thing. But it's looking
or more
at
perfume if they need to.
Well, yeah, for occasions, aren't there?
Yeah. I actually, that's actually something I think actually happens more often than not, to be honest. I've been in that situation myself as an employer where I've had to have conversations about the frequency of bathing.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So because it can be cultural as much as anything else. I had someone that came to work for me that from a completely different part of the world, and where they were from, having a shower every 2 weeks was perfectly okay. But it wasn't okay for the rest of my staff, because it well, not without the use of deodorant as well. I mean, sometimes these conversations are quite tough, though. They're quite tough things to talk about in the first place. What I wanted to talk about there, though, earlier in the week I recorded a podcast with some people around culture change and leadership. And it was quite interesting because one of the guys on that was from an award-winning team, and they'd gone through a whole period of change in terms of how their leadership style and how to lead these days. And we talked a lot about vulnerability, and I just wonder how much of this is kind of interlinked with that, Helen, as well, because if businesses aren't prepared to have a culture of vulnerability and actually learning from mistakes and being open about mistakes and actually being interested in people as well. I think that was another real important part of that, which is that if you just see your workforce as, people that turn up for work, but you're not interested in what happens to them outside of work, then none of this other bit's going to ever happen. Do you see a fair bit of that still?
Yes. Yeah. Of course we do. We see a lot of situations where perhaps actually quite often employers might be doing really well, but then some bright spark comes in with a new idea that, let's give everybody this questionnaire, or let's put everyone through this process as part of their return to work interviews. And it's very well intentioned, and they are getting that from somewhere. They know that a return to work interview can be very beneficial, but the way they're managing it is usually kind of a one size fits all tool or something to tick a box, and then that can disengage. It can create problems where perhaps before someone had a normal human conversation with somebody, they're having to go through,
or it's organizational heavy, maybe, as well. That it's kind of like, so all of these questions are weighted towards, are we going to be able to use this person continually for this organization, as opposed to what's actually going on with you, how can we help?
Yeah. And that's what I love about vocational rehab, really, that we look at things at all those levels. So we can work with an organization to implement to support them with implementing the right wellbeing programs, not just one that ticks a box. We can look at the demographics of their workforce, the kinds of environments they're working in, the shift patterns and all of that. We can work with them to implement strategies that are really going to make a difference. But then we can also work with individuals on a case-by-case basis where there are particular difficulties, and perhaps identify where perhaps they've got trends and things like that, to implement some training for line managers. And that's what I love about it, that we can do all of those things and yet also be working in the community and kind of charity sectors and public sectors to be making a difference for those groups of people who don't have access to all those services as well.
Helen, are there any sectors, and this might be a little bit broad brush here, but are there any sectors that you find are very good at sort of supporting their people? And on the flip side, are there any sort of sectors that you find actually that's where you're focusing a lot of your energy on, a lot of your inquiries come from certain parts, or is it actually a little bit of everything, and there's good and bad people in all sorts of sectors? I'm just really interested to know if it can be drilled down to a sector level.
I think there's good and bad in all sectors. That is, I think that there are some sectors that perhaps invest more in their staff in the first place because of the training that's necessary. So there are some jobs that, you'll take on a graduate and train them for 5 years. So if that graduate, once they finish their training, is having a wobble, for want of a better term, because it could be all sorts of things, having some difficulties, then there's more of a willingness to invest in that person to help them to get back to where they need to be. So you find that those sorts of industries or kinds of employees within those industries are often better supported. For example, we'll engage our services rather than go through a tick box exercise of, we need to do this kind of referral to tick the box. They actually look at what is going to make a difference and work. I think, obviously there are differences between larger companies and smaller companies. larger companies have more resources, they'll have more employee benefits, they'll be able to offer more things, they've probably got more alternative roles to offer, those sorts of things, more kind of funding for support. But on the flip side, they can, depending on the organisation, they can be very, this is our organisational structure, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Whereas, not all the time, but occasionally, whereas smaller organisations, just SMEs, they'll adapt. You can pick up the phone to someone who is a decision maker, who can make a difference, and you can pick up the phone and say, look, we've got this situation, here's the options, what do you think? And you can make you can have some sensible conversations and come up with some sensible outcomes then. But of course, they don't always have the resources, because for them, I'm a small business owner. I get it. You think, wow, how much? So, but again, you can have that conversation with someone who's perhaps more of a decision maker to say, well, yes, investing this, but actually it will cost you this much if it goes this way, or if you need to replace this person, this is what it would cost. So again, you can have those sensible conversations.
Yeah.
One thing that gets mentioned on this show, probably almost as much as laptop risers.
I imagine that on your word bingo, I imagine that one comes off a lot.
And 1980s music.
And 1980s music. And
well.
I was thinking, actually, Helen, in the middle of that, when you were talking about kind of there is good and bad in everyone, Ebony and Ivory, that the one thing that comes up all of the time is tick box. That sentence, or those two words, tick box, must come up more than any others. If I did a little semantics search through all of the episodes of WoW, of which there's about 100 now, that we would have said that so many times. Question to both of you: why, if everybody that's an expert that comes on this show says that a tick box exercise doesn't work, why do people continue to do it? Why are we still seeing it?
Because people like a process, especially if they're a large organisation. It's because they need to streamline things and make sure they're doing everything they need to, and things don't get missed. I completely understand all this. And in smaller organisations, they perhaps don't have, they might not have an in-house HR, they might not have, the guidance that they need, and they need something to measure against, say, it's okay, we're doing what we're meant to do. They just don't realise. And people like a crib sheet. People like a list of rules to follow. You get the occasional maverick, but most of the time they like a list of rules. And I think that's why, just reassurance. Stephen, and lack of knowledge of what else is out there as well.
Is it partly, though, I'm going to be really controversial here.
Okay.
And I see we've got, as soon as I said the word controversial, I saw that more people were watching as well. By the way, if you are watching, and you want to put a comment, and please do. We're happy.
Forgot people were watching. I felt like we were just having a chat.
Yeah, well, that's the best way, isn't it?
We're self-conscious now.
Quite happy to field questions and put those questions in. So don't just feel like you have to lurk there in the background, folks, if you're watching this. Unless you're now listening to this on Spotify, in which case you've missed a chance. But you can still comment. But yeah, is part of it the fact that actually, for all the right reasons, we have got things like HSE, DSE, regs, etc., and therefore, as part of all of that, the way it's kind of presented is as a kind of tick box exercise. Therefore, if we start these processes at sort of governmental level, if you like, as tick box exercises, people feel like tick box exercises are the way that we should be doing these things.
Yeah.
We even
whereas Whereas, controversial, if we actually decided that we needed to change all that and we made maybe some of those processes more educational, maybe we'd find that there's a different way through this. In other words, I don't just want you to appoint a member of a team, Steve, say, for example, Steve, you're going to do DSE assessments for all of your staff, etc. You've got no knowledge whatsoever about it, but here's a sheet, get on with it, or here's a 5-minute course, get on with it. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to say that every company needs to have some education in this area, and actually what we're looking for is that they've passed that education. They've taken part in and they've passed that education, which might actually show them the options that are available in terms of the way that they can handle this, and signpost them to organizations that could help. Just a idea. Any comments?
Yeah, I think you're quite close with that. No, I think you're quite close with that, and I think you tied it back to then the HSE and the DSE sort of regulations. I think what it probably reflects on is that people who maybe aren't adequately trained are being given that level, that area of responsibility. And let's for all of us, if you're not sure about something, what do? You go on the internet and you find out about it, and you come up with a list of things that you need to make sure you cover. And I think that using people who aren't maybe either educated or trained or willing or wanting to work in that area, the natural reaction is, let's get a list of things and let's tick like a to-do list that we all start with at work. Let's just get it all done. And then if anyone questions me, there you go. I asked those 10 questions and I got 10 answers, rather than, as you say, Graham, getting people who want to be involved in it, want to be invested in the process, want to be trained. They will use that crib sheet or list as some sort of background guidance, but it doesn't form the basis upon what they're doing. They're using their knowledge, their education, their empathy to help resolve those issues. So I think that's where it is. To me, it's identifying the right person and not just giving it, like you said, to Steve to go and sort out, because Steve will just get a list and he will just check that list off.
You know what? You need to do a poll on that on LinkedIn tomorrow. Who's used YouTube Googlepedia to find out about DSE and see all the hands that go up?
Yeah.
Helen, any comments on that?
Yeah, and I think I agree, Steve, and I think that even within the professionals working in that area, sometimes there's well, going back to that tick box, you tick box, okay, I'm going to do an OH assessment. Actually, the person doing that doesn't really know what they're going to get for that. What does that really mean? And there are different approaches and types of OH assessment, as we know, and people might be referring through without really understanding what it is, and without asking the right questions. So actually, if you're going to make a referral, ask some specific question. That's what I always say, because in our business, we're proactive. So if we're not sure what you want out of this, we will pick up the phone and ask and clarify. But most organisations, it is a kind of a workflow, especially if you have in-house OC health. So it's about knowing what you're getting for that, and actually questioning, okay, if what I'm getting is a telephone assessment, for someone who perhaps is doing quite a manual role or a safety critical role, is that appropriate? Is that going to give me what I need? Having the knowledge, as you were saying, but and the confidence, say, actually, I think it needs something different, because people just go through the process.
They do. Now, listen, Stephen, have you noticed, by the way, just to throw a little aside, have you noticed under Helen's name, for all of these people that are watching, you can't actually read this because, but Stephen can, and he might now tell you. What does it say?
Director, OT Ergocom.
Ergocom. Yeah. So Helen, explain the Ergocom bit of what you do.
I suppose, in all honesty, I inherited the name of the business. It's a business that's been going since 2008, and I inherited the name. But initially, it was more focused on the ergonomic assessments and developed, particularly sort of with my predecessor and myself, into more of a broader vocational rehab service, which includes ergonomics. So
exactly, that's where I was going really. So how do you then bring ergonomics back into what you do?
It's intrinsic in most of what we do, isn't it? It's looking. I think the trouble is people think of ergonomics as to most of the world, they think ergonomics, a chair, maybe shall I say desk raise, a laptop raise. But actually we know it's about the environment. It's whether it's cold, hot, the light, all of those things come into play. So if you're doing a work site assessment, it might not be called an ergonomic assessment, but you're going in and that's what you're looking at. If we're supporting someone with something that, to the person making the referral, they may not have thought of it as involving ergonomics. It could be a referral for someone with fatigue, who's struggling with fatigue. Actually, the right setup and the right environment that reduces the strain on that person can make a world of difference to their fatigue. But people don't think of it like that. So it can come into play in all sorts of cases that people wouldn't even think of, I think.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the things that's been quite dangerous in the field of ergonomics is that it's kind of become quite associated with product.
Yes.
And that's actually even dangerous for people like yourselves, Stephen, who actually sell product. Is it not?
Well, it is, because the product isn't always the answer. But as I was talking to some of the people I've spoke to in the last couple of days, actually the incorrect use of a product can actually sort of make the issue worse. So it isn't just a case of issuing out product left, right, and center. If that product doesn't work for that individual or can be adjusted to that individual, it actually can make the issue worse. So it's correct and appropriate use of the right product once you've considered it in the whole piece.
Yeah. I've got a great example of that. The times I've seen someone recommend a sit-stand desk for someone who has a standing tolerance of kind of 5 minutes or less. And you think, by the time they've stood up, got readjusted, they'll be sitting back down again. That really is not very useful. And what they've done is they've gone in just with that kind of ergonomic product hat on, and they haven't thought, let's look at this person's functional tolerances. Let's look at this person as a person and the bigger picture. And as soon as you do that, you know that a sit-down desk is a nonsense for that person. They can be great.
But that product could have been the best sit-stand desk on the market, bells and whistles. It could have been absolutely fantastic. But it's the right product for the wrong situation. So it's a great product, but absolutely not the right product to apply to that situation and that individual.
Well, interestingly, bringing it close to home, my wife has been had a really bad back recently, and's been suffering at work, and she said to me, I don't know what needs to do, etc. And some of the people at her work, God bless them, said, perhaps you need this, perhaps you need that, perhaps. And I think this is quite common of what a lot of people do. They say, well, perhaps you need this, perhaps you need that, and whatever. And I said to her, the first things first is you actually, because you can't identify yourself what the exact problem is you need to go and see a clinician, and you need to find out what the problem is, right? Let's start there, right? Because I need to know from a medical point of view, what's actually going on, right? Because once you and that's not always easy to get an answer, and it may take some time, etc. So you can try some things in the meantime, but seeking that medical advice in the first place, it really, really helps. The amount of times I've been to see someone and you say, "Have you seen a doctor?" No. Okay, so you've got back problems, or you've got neck problems, or you've got what looks like some kind of musculoskeletal disorder or whatever, but you've not been to see somebody, right? That would be a really good start, right? Because identifying exactly what that might be means that you may then have some kind of treatment plan. You may have some kind of physiotherapy. You may have, it may just be exercises or whatever. There may be some recommendations in terms of physically what you're capable of. As you said, if someone's got muscle weakness in their legs and whatever, and they can't stand for more than 5 minutes, give them a sit-stand desk. Why not? Just see how much they stand. They won't. It's completely pointless exercise. So finding out that stuff to begin with is really, really important. Building up the picture, which is what you must spend most of your time doing, Helen, is building up that picture of life in general, not just work in general. And as you say, therefore it's the ergonomics of life, isn't it? Not just the ergonomics of work. Yeah, is absolutely fundamental in terms of them being able to provide the answer.
Then again, looking at that same example from a slightly different perspective, if one of the rehab goals for that person is to increase their standing tolerance, then it may well be relevant, because actually, again, from a VOC rehab perspective, work can be part of your recovery and your rehab. You don't have to be 100% perfectly well to do it. So,
but there should be a program in place.
But it should be for a reason. Yes. Yeah. There should be a program supporting that and a reason for that decision. Yeah.
And not just a program, but within that as well, a revisiting of that on a regular basis to look at progress. Yeah. Review and progress. Hello from Jersey.
Hello, wow. Jersey.
How are the cows? Are they all right? Other places are available with cows. Now, you mentioned one of the things you did mention. I just wanted to show you this while we're here, because you may or may not have seen it. And Steven is from this business as well. One of the things you did mention is light, and ultimately, I do find that an awful lot of businesses don't think about things like this. And I'm also going to bring it out because the name of this show today actually was, in the first instance when I put it out, the day before Star Wars Day. Yeah, because it is.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's May the 3rd. There we go. Look at this. So this is a back product. I tend to use it as a lightsaber.
Why not?
But alternative uses for it are as a proper work light, task light that supports your body clock, isn't it?
Yeah, Stephen? It is. And I think, I don't know if you can tell, I've got mine on as well, just to my left, and you do find, I mean, it has a couple of main functions. I mean, one of them obviously is improving the light when you're doing such things like this, broadcasting and Teams calls and all those sort of things. But as Graham said, it basically, the light adjusts throughout the day to time with your body's natural circadian rhythm. So it's trying to address the tiredness that people experience from working in unnatural light, from those sort of top-down lights that people have in offices that do have a big impact on, we mentioned tiredness before, people's tiredness and energy levels and et cetera, et cetera. So this will change color throughout the day to tie in with the natural rhythm of the sun, and therefore maintain our energy levels. And as Graham said, it can also double up as a lightsaber, but only on the
apologies again to anyone that's listening on Spotify. You just have to close your eyes and assume that for a minute I looked just like Obi-Wan holding my giant lightsaber there. But much fun could be had. What are the biggest challenges for you then at the moment out there, Helen?
I think, I don't know if it's necessarily one of the biggest challenges, but theme I'm seeing is the impact of remote working, I think. We're a few years in now, and it absolutely has its benefits, and it allows flexibility. It allows people who perhaps could not maintain work to do so because they can eliminate the commute, all of those things that, I won't go on about. We've talked about them many, many times. So there's a lot of benefits there, but there are some of the challenges coming out now, with impact on perhaps the way people are communicating with each other, isolation, activity levels. So, I know from myself, as you can see, please don't look too hard because normally I have a background on and this thing doesn't allow me to. But I'm working from an office at home, and I've probably done a couple of 100 steps today because I didn't even walk to the car. So it's, on days when I'm doing meetings in London, my steps are way up. Days I'm working from home, way down. And when you combine that with the way that we live our lives in terms of we don't go to the cinema, we stream a film, we don't go out to eat, we order in on Deliveroo or whatever, other apps are available or whatever. But it's, the way that we're living our lives, it's getting more and more insular. And when you think of that in the context of people's physical activity, mental health, social engagement, but also if people are vulnerable, if someone has a situation at home, if there is a domestic abuse situation, or all sorts of challenges that perhaps maybe they have, it's not a risk situation necessarily. It might be that they have a lot of going on with the kids that they're not telling someone. They might have a health issue that they're worried about. If you're sitting with someone or seeing someone regularly that you work with, you might chat about that. You're not necessarily going to when all you do is have a Teams call about a specific business need. So that's something that is having a knock-on effect, I think. Not to say that home working's bad, though. It's a good thing, just needs to be managed.
I think it's a great thing, but you're absolutely right. And as Stephen will tell you, I'm literally chained to the desk. I mean, I'm only allowed out to make a cup of tea, but the chain only goes that far. Beyond that, the dog's on less of a leash, but they're going to let me out for June the 13th, though. It's fine. That's all. That's
Good.
All sorted. Yeah.
Good.
When I'm going to come to London to the day. I won't know myself.
Yeah.
I wonder whether we need to stop looking at it in terms of, especially for businesses. I mean, it's harder for people that are self-employed, but for businesses, I wonder whether we need to stop looking at it in terms of, are they in or are they out? Whether it's, are my team in the office, are they, or are they remote? And, is the answer, if they're at home too much, is the answer that we need to get them back into the office? Or is it a case of actually businesses starting to understand how they can perhaps use community a little bit more, or build community a little bit more, and maybe saying, okay, do you know what, Jeff, you're working from home for us, etc. But what we want you to do is, once a week or whatever, we want you to go and meet here with these with these other people. It might not be stakeholders from within the business, but it might be stakeholders that the business works with, and we in order to keep you sort of mentally fit, physically healthy and whatever, we'd like you to be there once a week.
And thinking about things in that different way, looking at, yes, okay, that person's role might not be client engagement or whatever it is, but actually they have a client on their doorstep they could visit occasionally, that kind of thing. I think you're right. But I also think it's about addressing how we communicate, because it's not just about, we say, oh, well, we've all got Teams or we've all got whatever it is. We can message each other. We can, actually, that's not the same thing. Having perhaps a kind of an informal catch-up call where people just chat, basically, maybe without the boss there, so that they can just have that chat, engage with each other, have more away days, maybe, if that's affordable for the business. Just rethinking, and it will be, there aren't, again, it's not a here's a list of things that will work, because then you end up with a tick box. It's think about your business and your team and what would suit them.
Like that.
Charity engagement. People love to be able to contribute. So if you have charity days, that kind of thing. But just really so that people feel less alone and more of a community, so that when they say, I'm a bit busy, could you help me with, the person on the other end doesn't think, what's she doing? I'm busy too.
Do you know what's really interesting in what you're saying there as well is that there's a massive piece in there around trust.
Yeah.
Massive piece around trust. And that actually, if one of the things that's hardest for people at the top to get their head around, but actually if they can get their head around it, it will work really well within their organization, is if they can trust people further down the organization to perhaps be having open and frank conversations with each other about what may be going wrong within the organization without it necessarily being seen as bad for the organization, right? Then that could be a good thing,
Well, yeah. I actively encourage my team to have meetings without me. They go off and they'll have a little meeting to sort something out, and they come back and say, Helen, we've sorted that. What do you think of this? And I think, excellent. But they will have kind of peer-to-peer support. So if they have perhaps they're getting certain kinds of cases through from a particular client, they'll say, let's have a regular call to go through our cases together for this client, so that we can help each other and support each other. And as part of that, because I'm not part of it, sometimes I hear back, oh, did you hear so-and-so's going to this exciting thing at the weekend? They've had other conversations as well. They've engaged with each other in a more real way. That's
great. I think it's great. You're obviously a great leader.
I can't answer that. You'll have to ask them.
If you work for Helen, please do ring in now or text in and let us know just how great Helen is as a leader. We'd all like to know. I'm sure you are. I'm absolutely certain. That's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I didn't introduce you to us. Helen, Stephen, Helen.
Hello.
Hello. Hello to each other afterwards on LinkedIn and whatever as well.
We will.
If you've enjoyed this today, or it's made you think of any kind of questions around the area of rehabilitation and helping people get back to work or stay in work, perhaps you've been doing everything tick box and think, maybe after hearing this conversation, perhaps we shouldn't do it that way anymore. Please do reach out to the wonderful Helen afterwards and connect with her on whatever platform. What's your website address, Helen, just so that people can find you there?
It's ergocom.co.uk.
ergocom.co.uk. Yeah, I think everybody.
I so wanted it to be ergocom.com.
I know.
That's what I was
ergo.com, but it's not.
Okay. I was thinking, please say .com.com. It would have been brilliant, but
it would.
Yeah. I think the best web address ever would be comcom.com. That would be great, wouldn't it? Yeah. Imagine having that.
Let's see if it's available now.
Quick, beat it to it, Graham.
Quick. Somebody do that. Oh, thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you, as I say, I hope you've enjoyed that that whole conversation. you know, if you've got any questions on vocational rehabilitation or your favorite Simple Minds album, either, it's fine. You can put them to us over the next week or so. You can catch up on previous episodes of this at wowergonomics.com. Go and fill your boots. That would be great. We'll be back same time, same place next week with another one of these. Till then, from Helen, Stephen and myself, bye for now.